afternoon, warriors. My name is Robin. I'm the addiction warrior. I have with me Karen, the recovery warrior. And this afternoon, I have with me the wonderful Fran. So welcome to Warriors TV, guys. How are we doing today?
Yeah.
Is it just me that's really warm?
No, it is so hot. If anybody thinks I'm having a heart attack now, I'm just sweating.
Oh, don't worry. Well, Fran, as you are new on Warriors TV, I have a couple of quick fire questions for you if you're up for a couple of those.
Okay.
Yeah, there won't be that many, and there's no tests or anything, so don't worry. Okay, first question. If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, every single day, what would it be?
I can't think of any food I like enough to eat for the rest of my life.
It's quite the commitment, isn't it? I don't think I could pick just one.
No, not for me. I like variety too much.
No. No?
Banquet.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if you could pick one food as Sunday roast, because I could work with that. That counts as one food, doesn't it?
Should do.
It should do. Okay, would you say that you're an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, definitely an early bird. I'm a night owl.
What about you, Karen?
Yeah.
Yes, early birds here.
Too old to be now.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, I prefer to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and then stay awake until 4 in the morning.
No, I couldn't stay awake until 4 in the morning.
No, bed 10:30 at best for me. Okay, do you prefer films or TV programs?
I'm not really a TV or film person. I'm more of a book or audiobook person.
Okay, I'll alter it for you. Would you say you're more of a book or an audiobook person?
Audiobook.
No?
Yeah.
I do like a good audiobook. What about you, Karen, for films, TV programs, books, or audiobooks?
Well, I love movies, but I also love, now that television has gotten so much better with all these good writers and things, I love a good TV series, binge watching a good TV series like Killing Eve or what was the one, Schitt's Creek?
Yes, Creek? Something. I haven't seen it, but I know it. No, they've definitely started producing lots of great telly recently. I saw one called New Amsterdam, and it was based on a real person, and it is a medical drama, but it's different to any other I've seen, and I must have cried at least once in every episode. It's just, I'm just getting sappy, really. See, Kerry's ahead of me. That was my next question, Kerry. That was my final question. There's a question that our warrior queen always asks, and it's whether pineapple belongs on pizza. So I was going to ask you that in honor of her.
Are you asking that me that? Because I don't.
Indeed.
Don't really eat pizza, so I don't mind it. Whatever anybody else prefers.
You're so diplomatic.
What we've learned
about fantastic.
What we've learned about you, Fran, is that you are a non-television or film watching early bird.
Early bird.
You're a rare breed.
That eats well as well. Too many variety. Yes. That's fantastic. What about you, Karen? I don't know if I've heard you answer this question.
Oh, pineapple does not belong on pizza.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I'm so glad you said that. Yes, Kerry, I did ask your question. However, the answer was in my favour, so take that as what you will. No pineapple over here. And that's it. That's your quick fire questions done. You did it. You passed. You're all good. So, obviously, we've had your bio and everything, but can you tell us a little bit about who Fran is and how you got to where you are today?
Throughout the whole of my life, I have had complex trauma and didn't know about it. I didn't know that that's what I had until probably 5-6 years ago. And I first started having therapy when I was 19, 20. And I had 15, I've had 15 therapists over my life. And it took me until 2016 before I had a therapist before I realised that I had suffered complex trauma. And I knew that it was both my parents that were the perpetrators. But most of the therapy that I had up until 2015 didn't help me because it wasn't aimed at treating trauma. So it didn't really make an impact. And the thing is that trauma is now treatable. It requires specialist therapists with specialist therapy skills. And I would say that a lot of therapists don't have the skills or the understanding of trauma to be able to treat it. And therefore, a lot of people with C-PTSD aren't getting diagnosed, or they're not getting the therapy is actually really going to help them. I don't want to spend my life managing symptoms of C-PTSD. I want to be free of them. And therefore, I want therapy that is going to heal me, not just enable me to manage my symptoms.
Can I ask you,
the only therapy that really made a difference. Sorry, I missed that. What does C-PTSD stand for? Yeah, so it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex trauma, it just means multiple traumas rather than a single isolated trauma, and it's usually, but not always, usually from childhood.
Okay, that's interesting. And so you talked about how you received quite a large amount of various therapies and that most of them didn't work. So would you say that up until the point where you started getting like specific therapy, they were just like using almost like a size fits all type of approach?
Yes, but the tools they were using also weren't suited to trauma. So I had hypnotherapy, but the hypnotherapy ended up re-traumatizing me. I felt like I was going to go mad because it brought everything up, all my emotions up, and I had no way of handling them.
Yeah. I think we've lost Karen. Hopefully she'll be back in a bit. But no, that's interesting. So has the sort of diagnosis of complex PTSD been around for quite a while? The official definition of it, really?
Oh gosh. From what I've read in The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, a brilliant book, by the way, and understandable by non-professionals, they were trying to get it in as an official diagnosis and they couldn't. So you're asking me about the history of it, and I don't really know. I know it is now recognised as by the WHO.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the problem is that they weren't able to get it recognised.
Yeah.
The Diagnostic and Statistics Manual.
Yeah, the DSM-5. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't able. I don't think they were able to get it in, and that's been the problem. If you can't get a diagnosis, you can't get a treatment for it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's if it's not actually officially recognised, getting effective treatment can be quite difficult, which I'm sure you obviously know.
Yeah, that has been my experience.
Mm.
And I would say that a lot of therapists don't understand complex trauma, because complex trauma is very different to a single isolated trauma.
Mhm.
So I'd say that with a single isolated trauma, CBT, exposure, that kind of thing could potentially work, so long as the client has full control over it.
Mhm.
But I think for complex trauma, because you don't really know what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
and the triggers could be anything, the risk of re-traumatization is just too high.
Yeah. So of all the
And I have been re-traumatized by a therapist
yeah.
who used exposure with me,
Mhm.
and I knew it was going to re-traumatize me, and I said, please don't ever use that with me. And
Yeah.
he used it, which wasn't collaborative.
I must admit, exposure therapy is quite an intense form of therapy, isn't it? I've only studied a little bit in my degree, but basically when I was taught about it, it was don't use it. That was the message I got from it, because it might be effective. It might be effective in the long term, but the actual, again, coming back to the actual trauma of going through it, can make things worse. And obviously, in your case, it did.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be, I knew it would be harmful. I instinctively knew it would be harmful.
Yeah.
And how it was set up meant that it wasn't collaborative, and it has to be collaborative, and it wasn't.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It sort of highlights how important it is for patients and people who are receiving any form of treatment, how important it is to include them in the actual final treatment choices, and to actually listen to their opinions and preferences, and just listen to them and not just go, I know what I'm talking about, this is going to happen.
Yeah, that was the whole problem. He didn't listen to what I saw to be the problem.
Yeah.
So I was struggling with work. I went to therapy, it was on the NHS, for help with work. They didn't help with work, so therefore I wasn't going to get that help, even though that was the thing that I needed help with. And it wasn't careers advice, that was the problem. They saw it as careers advice, which they said they didn't help with. I needed help with massive underlying trauma, which was causing me problems with why I was struggling so much with work.
Yeah, it wasn't the actual work itself you were struggling with, it was something else that was preventing you from actually completing your work. There's a difference, isn't there?
There is a big difference. It was the trauma was causing me a huge amount of distress for anything work related, and my therapist missed that was the issue, even when I tried to tell him.
No, thank you for that. So after obviously everything that's happened to you, how would you say that that's influenced your education, what you decided to go into for a career? Has that influenced you at all?
Yeah, it has. So my business is as a trauma expert by experience, and I share my experiences of therapy, what helped me, what didn't help me, and my lived experience of complex trauma as a way to raise awareness about trauma, how it can be treated, what helps, what actually makes it worse. Because the frustrating thing is that it is treatable, but it requires specialist skills and specialist knowledge. And unfortunately, there are still lots of people with complex trauma who are being treated by counsellors who don't have the skills to treat it. So they're either not being helped or they're potentially being made worse.
Yeah. No, that's quite an interesting point.
If you had a physical illness, like a heart disease, you would expect to see a specialist. You wouldn't expect to be treated by your GP. With mental health, you can have a really complex mental health problems and be seen by a generalist counsellor.
I think that is something that comes up in pretty much all our podcasts. It just reiterates that mental health is as important, if not even more important, than physical health, and yet it's not treated as such. It's not treated as an equal thing. And I think you just summarised it there. You wouldn't go to get a heart attack treated by a GP. They'd send you to a specialist. And it's just unfortunate that these specialists that are required to help with C-PTSD, I've got too many letters confused, I'm so sorry. They're just not available, or they're not properly trained, or just all these different issues. And it's such a shame, because it must be so scary to go through all of this, understand how it's affected you, and to feel like you have to do it alone.
I was only able to overcome the complex trauma and live a life largely free of the symptoms of complex trauma when I had trauma therapy given by a specialist trauma therapist.
Yeah.
And the problem with seeing therapists who don't know what they're doing, a major part of trauma is the belief that nothing you do will make any difference, because that is trauma.
Yeah.
At the time of the trauma, nothing you did made any difference. So if you're having therapy that isn't helping, it's just reinforcing that belief.
Yeah.
And it's compounding the problem, because it makes it seem that nothing that you do therapy-wise will help you.
No, that's a really interesting point, actually. And now there is a question that has been given to us both, and it's the question of, what does mental health mean to you and for me? So what does mental health mean to you?
Mental health to me means being able to live my life largely unhampered by the effects of the abuse, the trauma. It's being able to have relationships with other people and enjoy those relationships, and have friendships and enjoy those friendships. Because I don't think people realise just how isolating trauma is, because you don't have the social skills, you don't have the relationship skills, you don't have the ability to get on with other people. You're very easily triggered. So you come across as aggressive, as argumentative, as angry, shouty. You can be a very difficult person for other people to be around. And so people, it becomes very isolating, and we are very social creatures. A big part of our mental health is made up of having supportive, nurturing friendships and relationships. And if you have complex trauma, that is something that is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest part of mental health is being able to form and keep friendships, being able to have relationships, being able to communicate when things go wrong, rather than go into a freeze response and not be able to do anything.
No, I completely relate to a lot of that. I personally haven't experienced trauma, particularly to the same level as you. But if we branch out into another element of mental health, I suffer from anxiety and a panic disorder. And I think for me, what mental health means to me is to have the ability to live freely, if that makes sense. And sometimes that isn't even because the mental health issues are restricting me, but simply their acknowledgement in the real world is restricting me. So I also have a physical condition called lipedema, and if I had an issue with that and needed some time, it affects my legs. So if I needed some time to stop whatever I was doing just for that to settle down, that would be acknowledged, it wouldn't be questioned, and there would be sort of no restriction there. Whereas if I started having a panic attack because there was some confrontation nearby, or I was in quite a crowded room, there would have to be an explanation. There'd be some sort of there's usually some sort of comment on how I should be dealing with this, and it taught me that loads of people who haven't experienced the same thing as you feel like they have the right to tell you how you should be reacting, how little of a deal this is, and that you're fine. And I think that for me, obviously I feel restricted from having mental health issues, but the difference in the real world between having a physical and a mental health issue, that really sort of defines how free I feel in terms of expressing it and just living with it, really, because these issues are probably things that will never leave me. They'll always be there in some form, but it seems to be how the world perceives that for me. So I think for me, mental health is feeling free in my own life as me, however I come, really.
I just want to go back and clarify something. I was using the third person, your difficult person. Sorry, you're easily angered. I wanted to kind of own that. That was my experience. I was a difficult person to be around. I was very I was very reactive. I was very quick to anger, rather than make it sound like it's other people, because it's not. This is me. This was about me and my experience.
Of course. But the thing is, the fact that you've said that this is how you feel, there is a good chance there are loads of people out there who do feel the same way as you. So I think what you said was really relevant. I think it'll resound in quite a few people. So, apparently, Karen had a few technical issues, but she is probably going to stay on the comments for now. And she said invisible illnesses are always judged more. So what would you say in response to that?
If you have cancer, and it's a terrible disease, you get understanding. I think you know, I'm not going to say you 100% get understanding, but you'll get more understanding than if it's a mental health problem. It's like, you know, people can't see it. And I don't think people could understand why I was struggling so much, because I came across as competent, I came across as articulate, I came across as intelligent. So it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. Why are you struggling with work so much? It can't possibly be this much of a problem for you. And I bought into that. I bought into the belief that I was just lazy, that I could just overcome my problems with procrastination and all my work issues would resolve. They didn't. There's no way that could happen until the underlying trauma was dealt with. And once that underlying trauma was dealt with, my life started to turn around. But it wasn't laziness and it wasn't procrastination.
Yeah. It's sad to think that just sort of, I can hear an echo of myself. I'm not quite sure why. Oh well. But there is an element of Karen said down here, do you think there's an element of people tend to fear and sort of misjudge what they don't understand? Do you think there's an element of that there as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. They can't imagine what it could be like. They could possibly, I mean, if they've been physically ill, then they can imagine, they can have an idea of what it might be like. But for something that they've never experienced, it's not something that they can relate to.
That's interesting though, isn't it? Because like you said before, obviously talking about cancer, it's quite a horrible condition. There are some people who probably won't have much experience with cancer in general. So there might be a lot of misunderstanding there as well. But like you said, there's a different approach to that. So there is an element of understanding, but do you think maybe because it's put under this umbrella of mental health that it then adds to the misunderstanding or just the judgment, I guess?
In my experience, and I haven't had cancer, so I can't know what it is like for people who have had cancer.
Mm.
There is more stigmatism in society for mental health problems than there are for physical health problems.
Yeah.
I could say that the majority of people that I have met who have had cancer have not had an issue saying it, but they are far less likely to admit to having any mental health problem. So if they've had both, I will hear about the cancer, but I wouldn't hear about their depression or their trauma or something like that.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting. Another comment from Cameron to build on what you just said. She says that she was convinced she was weak and pathetic rather than traumatized. So do you think maybe that plays into how we tell people about our physical illnesses compared to our mental illnesses? This idea that with mental issues, particularly things like trauma, like Karen has said, we might be not encouraged, but made to feel like suffering from this issue within mental health is a sign that we are weak or pathetic. Do you think that plays into why people might not talk about mental health compared to physical health as much?
I wouldn't say weak or pathetic. I think it's more because they don't understand it and they can't relate to it. It's frightening. It's potentially unsettling or frightening, or they don't know how to respond or anything like that.
Yeah.
What I would say though is that the people that I have told, so all my friends know about my history of complex trauma, they have always been accepting. Maybe I'm just very careful about who I choose as my friends. However, I have been stigmatized by therapists. In fact, the stigmatism, I probably only ever experienced stigmatism from therapists and possibly my GP. I've never had it from my friends.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you've experienced that, because no one should have to go through that. We're made to feel like going to our GPs and seeking support and therapy, that is a good thing to do, that we will go there and not be judged and to be helped. And it's probably quite frustrating that you've had to go through that by the people that you thought would help the most.
It's not so it's not my own therapist. That's usually not the people that I've experienced stigmatism from. It's therapists that I've met on, say, like training courses. They'll be chatting to me normally until they hear about my history of trauma, and then the whole manner and attitude towards me changes, and they start to talk down to me. And, and the last time this happened to me, I was at a course about shame, believe it or not. So I did actually point out to them that they were shaming me.
Yeah. How did they respond?
They were astonished. They had no idea they were doing it.
Yeah. I guess that comes under the misunderstanding again, that it's not just the general population, it's actual therapists and professionals, which is, like you said, why it's so important to have someone who is specialized in this particular topic to actually be able to help at all.
I'd hope so. I think it's because it's kind of like a part of society.
Mm.
If it's embedded in society, it's harder to spot and harder to realise that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So,
and I think part of the problem is that the NHS is coming from the medical model of mental health. So these are your symptoms, this is your diagnosis, this is your treatment, rather than, so it's kind of like, what's wrong with you, rather than far more compassionate of
what's going on?
What happened to you? What happened to you in your life that has caused you to feel this way now?
Yeah. No, that's interesting, because obviously the whole sort of the awareness of mental health and the increase in treatment for mental health, they obviously based a lot of the treatments for mental health in the same way that they based treatments for physical health, like you said, the medical model. And nowadays I've started to notice that they're starting to bring other models in that they're not so just like, this is how that goes, that step, and that's the result. There's a lot more to it, there's a bit more intricacy into it, and it becomes a lot more personal, because surely one thing that works for your complex trauma, there's no guarantee that's going to work for somebody else's. Even though it's classed under the same name, how we experience everything is really, really unique to us.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about just how it's perceived in real life, and to sort of move on to something a little bit more uplifting, a question from Adam a bit earlier on. In your perspective, what is an element of self-care that works for you in terms of managing complex trauma?
Noticing straight away when I'm starting to feel off, or if I've been triggered by something, and dealing with it straight away rather than letting it spiral.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant.
And with relation to my relationships and my friendships, and it's being really, I'm not going to say being really mindful about my communication, because I'm probably not. But
is it just sort of bringing
really putting the effort into my communication and how I am coming across, and thinking how this is going to affect my friendships in the long term. I have to ask myself, would I rather be right about this particular thing, or would I rather have my friendship? And I'd rather have my friendship, to be honest. So it's wanting to sort it out rather than wanting to be right.
Yeah, it's just bringing that sort of gentle awareness to the things you're saying, and how that could be sort of construed and everything. So yeah, when you said mindfulness, I don't want to say mindfulness, it is an element of mindfulness. And again, I think there's some sort of stigma around mindfulness as well, whereas you can just sort of just bringing a little bit of gentle awareness to something, it is an element of mindfulness. It's just a very small one, but it can be quite effective.
It's learning not to react.
Yeah.
And taking a pause and thinking, okay, what's really going on behind this, rather than assuming that it's something that the person has done, because quite often that's just the trigger and it's nothing really to do with them.
Yeah.
And wanting to sort it out. I grew up in a family where nothing ever got sorted out, nothing ever got resolved. There was never any communication, there was never any this is what was going on for me, how this was this what was going on for you. It was always silent treatment, sweeping things under the carpet, no matter how terrible they were, and pretending that they never happened.
Yeah.
And so long as we looked like we were a good, upstanding Christian family, it didn't matter what was really going on behind closed doors. So I hate that pretense, and I can't stand being around people where I'm expected to pretend because I have such a strong aversion to it that I'd rather not be around them.
Yeah. No, again, that's good. That's another way to sort of look after yourself, is to make sure if there are people around you who are not helping you, just general mental health, just to maintain a healthy, good mental health, then just take yourself away from that. You don't have to stay around people who are damaging to you.
Yeah, it's so important. And I have fallen into the trap of, if I have studied communication, therefore I should be able to get on with anybody. And I've now realised, no, actually I don't, and I'm not responsible for how other people are. I'm only responsible for who I am.
Exactly. No, it's a really good way to just approach daily living. That's really good, thank you. So, moving on from that, what could you tell me about open dialogue? So what is it, and what does it involve? What is it?
I love open dialogue. It was developed in Western Lapland originally to treat psychosis, and it was so successful that they now use it for every mental health problem in their country. And there's a lot of research behind it for psychosis, and these figures are from memory, so they may not be completely accurate. But it's something like 84% of people after 2 years of treatment are back in full-time work or study, and the majority are off medication. And a 10-year follow-up shows them to be stable. That's for psychosis, because they catch it straight away. If you have a first psychotic episode and you receive appropriate treatment as soon as possible, then the outcomes are really positive. So the thing about open dialogue, I'll compare it to the NHS. Open dialogue in Western Lapland, you phone a hotline. The person that you speak to, you are then seen within 24 hours of speaking to somebody, and the person who answers the call is the person who you will then see. And you always have 2 co-facilitators, and it's done within a community. So it would be family, friends, anybody who is related, anybody that they call the person at the centre of concern is the client. So anybody who has the psychotic episode wants to be there. Is this making sense?
Yeah, no, it is.
So it's based on a premise that mental health problems don't occur in isolation. They're influenced by the environment and our relationships. So therefore, you incorporate the relationships that the person has into the treatment, and it makes it much more effective. And so you receive in 24 hours, and you can request as many. You can request to have, they call them network meetings. You can request to have the meetings as often as you like, for as long as you want them. And people go, ooh, that's going to be expensive. And in the short term, yes, it is much more expensive, but you save on long-term treatment, like people not needing to be hospitalised, because they have been helped.
Yeah.
And because people know that they can get the help that they need, they're far less likely to request them, if that makes sense. It's the reassurance of knowing that you can have the help whenever you want it, means that you're put at ease, and therefore you don't need them quite as often as you think you're going to need them. But I mean, I did open. It's absolutely amazing. They're trialing it in the NHS.
Really?
Yeah.
No, that sounds amazing. And like you said, just having that choice of going, okay, if I need to speak to someone, I can, and I'm not put on a 6-month waiting list. And I suppose they're not made to feel like these are the only things that are going to help them, and they're really hard to find, and they've just got to be patient and wait for them. It's there for them when they need it. And no, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, immediate help is one of the principles of open dialogue. I loved the foundation training. I got such a lot out of it personally for myself. It contributed to my personal development. It transformed how I communicated with my friends. I'd previously done nonviolent communication, NVC, which is kind of needs-based communication. And although initially I got a lot out of that, it also, I ended up just tongue-tied and never being able to express myself. Whereas open dialogue, it gave me my voice.
No, that sounds amazing. That just sounds like such a better approach. And it sounds effective by the stats that you gave me. Even if they're not completely right, they're brilliant. No, that sounds really, really good. I have a question from the comments for you.
Okay.
When do you think support should start, and what age should mental health be spoken to about children?
I would normalise mental health with children. I would make it a normal part of everyday conversations and everyday life, so that they grow up knowing that if they're struggling with their feelings, that it's okay to speak up. And I would start as early as possible. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. I completely agree with that.
And what was the first part of the question, Alice?
When do you think support should start?
Support for who? Are we talking about?
I'm not too sure.
Clear the context.
Yeah, it just says, when do you think the support should start? So, I'm afraid I don't know what that means, Adam. Sorry. But definitely I agree with what you said about the mental health and sort of when children should be told, because if a child comes up to their parents like, my stomach hurts, oh, you must have a bit of a stomach bug, and that's it. You just sort of go, yeah, it's a stomach bug, that's fine. Go sit on the sofa, we'll get a blanket and we'll just wait until you feel a bit better. Like, if that would, like, if kids came home and said, I don't feel very happy today, it would be so nice if we just did the same thing and went, okay, today's not a happy day. You're feeling sad and that's okay. Go on the sofa with a blanket and we'll wait until you're feeling better.
Or talk about it.
Yeah, or even talk about it, or just
what is it that
listen to them and just see what they want to say.
What is it that's causing you to feel unhappy?
Yeah, exactly. They've given the rest of the question for me. So when do you think support should start for trauma victims, as there is a waiting list? So do you think support should have been changed so that it can start immediately? I'm assuming there's an obvious answer there.
Why would you want to exacerbate something that is already a difficult condition to treat?
Exactly.
The longer you leave it, the harder it's going to treat. And actually, if it's something that happened in childhood, with EMDR, children process really quickly, as do young adults. So teenagers and young adults process really quickly.
Yeah.
So if you can help them as soon as possible, they're going to be able to get on with their lives. Because this was my problem. I was that my life was on pause until I was in my 40s, and that was when the trauma was finally resolved. And they're not compounding their traumas by doing things that aren't good for them. So they're not kind of then getting into drugs or alcohol or other addictions, or getting themselves or getting involved in abusive relationships, which are, all those things are going to make treating the trauma more difficult.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. So we've actually been talking for quite a while. So just before we try and finish this all up, because thank you so much for coming on. I've had a really, really interesting conversation with you. It's been awesome.
Thank you. I know I've really appreciated. I feel really at ease, and I'm quite surprised at how at ease I feel. So thank you for your interviewing.
Oh, you're very welcome. This is actually only my second time hosting a podcast, so I obviously didn't mess up the first one too badly for them to ask me to do another one. Brilliant. Oh, there's one more question before we finish up. It's just come in. Adam is asking, would you recommend the Mental Health Warriors?
Yes, I would. Are you saying for in what's the context?
Well, I'm not too sure. Adam needs to be more specific with his questioning. I will tell him that. But I know that we offer like a signposting thing where if someone comes to us with any sort of issue, that we will help them get to somewhere that's definitely going to help. So, for example, if someone came to you, for example, I'm called the Addiction Warrior, so I have I know loads of different places that can help those who are struggling with addiction and can help really quite fast. So I guess if someone came to you and they were struggling, would you guide them to us, really? I'm guessing that's what he's asking.
If you knew, so I know you understand about addiction. If you have people that you know on about C-PTSD, and they can guide people towards effective treatment for C-PTSD, then yes, definitely, because I think that can make all the difference to somebody getting effective treatment.
Yeah.
If they have the treatment that is aimed at C-PTSD, it can make all the difference to their recovery. In the same way that knowing that the therapist understands addiction can make all the difference to their recovery.
Well, brilliant, because we want to end sort of this stigma of mental health. So
Absolutely.
We will go and make sure we'll get in contact with the different support services that are available for any sort of issue. So particularly C-PTSD, I'm really going to look into that and just see what is out there to help. Because if someone came to me, I wouldn't know where to go to start off with, because I don't have much experience with it, so I wouldn't know where to help. But I definitely, after speaking, you want to find out where I could go.
I do have people ask me about therapists, and so I do. I have an idea of therapists who treat C-PTSD, and so I will kind of steer them in that direction.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Can I just mention my book, please?
You can.
Go
for it.
I've got a book coming out next week called Childhood Trauma Recovery: The Email Conversations with My Therapist That Helped Me Overcome Childhood PTSD.
Oh, wow.
And it was my lockdown project. To keep me sane during lockdown, to keep my brain occupied and not driving, not coming up with weird and crazy, scary scenarios of what was going to happen. I focused on doing a book. And it's when I was having therapy with a trauma specialist, I would email him in between the therapy sessions. And we kept those emails, and with his permission, he knows about it. I've created a book.
That is fantastic. That's awesome. I'm definitely going to look for that.
Thank you.
No, it's brilliant. Well, if it's all right with you, I am going to bring this to a close. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you to Fran and to Karen at the beginning for joining us on Warrior TV. Tune in tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. UK Standard Time for the 3rd episode, I believe, of Power Hour of Mindfulness. So thanks for joining us. Please subscribe, and we now have PayPal up and running, so if you would like to donate, please do check that out. And it's goodbye from all of us at Warrior TV, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. So bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.